Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Automated, where I'm not going to do any hand gestures today. Automated, I of course am Stefan and Ilia. Automated is our weekly podcast that I think we're actually 2 weeks in a row right now.
No.
Maybe? Oh, never mind. JK. Automated is our from time to time podcast where we talk about robots, about how fun they are, how much they hurt our souls, and sometimes some fun stories about them. Sitting next to me in this smooth-looking leather jacket that makes it look like he just jumped off a motorcycle to deploy a really crappy robot, given on the t-shirt, is some flavor of a gentleman. Sir, who are you?
I'm your co-host who's very happy that you're restricting your arm motion currently. We're a little too close for comfort.
I learned from recent public events that arm motions are always going to be celebrated by everyone. So this, of course, is Automated. We do this show in two sections. First, we play a game where we make up a robot on ideally a completely silly and preposterous use case by using this lovely little demo app that Ilia put together that will tell us.
Let's not show that to the screen.
Yeah, we're not going to show it to the screen, so you can't steal the URL and destroy everything.
Because there's no password protection on it whatsoever.
Yeah, whatever. We're going to play a game where we come up with a robot, and then we're going to talk about some sort of subject in robotics. Ilia, what are we going to talk about?
We're going to talk about building vertically versus horizontally, as in growing up versus getting older.
And this is not at all related to the fact that we went to a talk recently where someone ad nauseum for an hour and a half talked about how great his frontier tech company was, that it was vertical, all the way down to the accounting software that they had built. We would never do an episode of this podcast to make fun of a unicorn founder. Ever, that would be totally untoward. So that being said, let's make fun of some startups.
Yeah, I think Stefan was mostly peeved at needing to sit through somebody else talking. So that's this is his revenge fantasy.
You know, there's like one voice I really like the sound of, and all the other ones are just kind of getting in the way.
Yeah, it's the one in your head. Is it still there when you don't talk, though? That one in your head?
Always present.
Yeah, it's always whispering. Yeah. Classic CEO trait.
So that being said, let's jump on into it.
We agreed no hand gestures.
That was a great hand gesture. That was built in.
Nobody's going to misinterpret you for being evildoer.
I'm getting a desperate call from our sales team right now, so I'm simultaneously.
Do we need to sell more robots?
We need to sell more robots right now.
I mean, okay. Can we take like a 2-minute digression? How are things at Polymath?
Polymath is doing good.
What's our main? What keeps us up at night currently?
Yeah, so it turns out people really want to automate some stuff. You might get that from our podcast name, but turns out people really want to automate some stuff. We are like, the tech is kind of swimming along. Like, you know, plenty of robot things are breaking and blowing up, but
it's like a salmon swimming upstream more than like a shark in the clear ocean. It's not totally smooth sailing.
Yeah,
but it's
we're making progress. And like, customers seem to be pretty stoked and signing up, and we're kicking off lots of projects, and yeah, it seems like this is a company that's gonna work.
Yay!
Yeah, look at that. I was actually.
Didn't even have to rehearse that high five.
Yeah,
I love it.
It was very smooth because we're athletic and cool.
That's right.
And you should be impressed by us and our athleticism, dear listener. Yeah, I mean, I was saying to a member of our team earlier that a neat thing about this podcast is like, it does drive actual business for us because some of you guys kind of want to build a robot, and we don't have to shill ourselves the whole time because our secret evil plan is that if we seem smart, you might want to work with us. So we don't have to be like, you know, this brought to you by Polymath Robotics. Sign up right now. I don't think we haven't done an episode where we did that since like the first 10.
No, I think that's just the subconscious subtext.
Yeah.
I think our audio producer just layers in, buy Polymath. Just constantly throughout the entire audio stream.
Yeah. Oh, crap. Our lead form just blew up. Everyone just signed up.
It's working. Too many business calls. Anyway, we're doing well.
Yeah.
You know, there's always more to do.
Yeah.
I think we're doing surprisingly better than we thought we would. Not
Yeah.
as well as our wildest hopes and dreams, which is pretty classic for startups.
Yep.
But
We are hiring across a bunch of things. If you want to build real robots and get them out there, kind of regardless of skill set, we'd love to hear from you because seems like we caught a tiger by its toe. With that being said, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, let's play a game.
all right.
All right. So this magical app that you put together that's not password protected and will be hacked within 14 minutes because I showed the screen briefly on our podcast says that we're going to apply LiDAR to waste management and recycling.
All right.
So here's the thing. So famously, some guy threw out a hard drive full of Bitcoin.
You know, we talked about this, I think.
We did?
Yeah. We were joking about how, like, it probably shouldn't be wet because then you were not going to get the data back from the hard drive.
Okay.
Your idea was to flood the entire thing and, like, sift it out as water. Which is an awful idea.
Sounds like an idea I'd have.
Yeah.
So you don't want to use LiDAR to find hard drives in a pile of garbage.
No. What will we do? You know, okay, here's what you do.
I want to find something weird in garbage.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Growing up in just north of Toronto, there was a dump
In
site.
the Great White North, our new enemy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
America's number 1 rival.
Yeah. They were the bad guys in Mighty Ducks. And, we haven't forgiven you for that.
Nicole's telling you to get on with it. Is pretty common for an operational dump site to be finished up to whatever level, kind of greened over, and then turned into like sort of Greenlands, or the one I'm thinking of was actually turned into a golf course.
Okay.
So what you do is you figure out via LiDAR what the optimal golf course layout is, and preemptively bury a little attractor for the golf ball that only turns on when you use a rigged golf ball. So when you run a future golf tournament,
But I don't think LiDAR would help you with that.
Well, you gotta map out the surface, right?
Yeah, but like finding surface normals to figure out what, like especially before they do a massive construction project.
Too boring.
I feel like that just looks like, hey, we're going to use LiDAR to see what a surface looks like.
Yes.
With like extra
Looks
steps
like
at the back end.
Geodetic. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. No cheating at golf.
Yeah, no cheating at golf. It's a holy sport, and there's no one quite as good as it as our dear leader Kim Jong Un, whose first time he ever saw a golf ball, he was putting it into a hole in one, that then jumped from one hole in one to another. It was actually one hole in two.
Nicole's getting more and more frazzled with our digressions.
All right, how about this? We look for collectibles that have been thrown out by mistake by parents.
With LiDAR?
Yeah.
The LiDAR doesn't give you, like, every single Superman issue 1 comic book is going to look like a flat plane, which, like, good luck. Like, here's a bunch of newspapers.
Should I be generating a new sentence? Are
we stripped out?
Now it's machine learning to waste management. This random number
Loves waste management.
Yeah, this random number generator is not very random.
I mean, randomness can involve repeats.
So applying machine learning to waste management means that, boom, look at that. We can use machine learning to figure out which things are in the trash that are valuable.
There you go. There you go. So actually, in recent years, I think we've talked about this, but there has been some work in automating recycling facilities in particular and sorting areas. And they tend to use these Delta robots, which is a particularly good arrangement for it, where you have a conveyor belt with stuff flying by it as fast as you can make it. You have a big bank of cameras that are super well lit so that the cameras can take really fast photos.
Yep.
They take photos, they do a really quick classification step, and then down the conveyor belt, an arm knows where that object would be.
Yep.
It's blind, it's operating, almost open loop. Swings down with this Delta configuration, picks up the thing with forced air, and drops it. So, like, soda cans is the classic thing.
Yeah,
it's filtering soda cans out.
So getting every soda can, per pick might be worth 25 cents.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, there's some objects that would be worth in excess of $10.
Yeah.
And I think it might be worth slowing down the whole line for that. Or actually, you might not be physically able to slow down the whole line.
Like smartphones would probably be worth $10
Yeah.
for recycling.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if you did a
I don't know if you'd have to slow it down at all, honestly. I think
Well, where I wanted to get was like the Superman comic.
Yeah.
Like the Superman comic, the boxed action figure, the whatever might like actually be worth something.
I feel like by the time it's been through municipal trash processing, it's no longer in mint condition.
Well, yeah,
Right? So
but
like,
it might be
the
in
value
like
is now.
it might be in some condition where it's not like in an amazing thing. Actually, like here's what we should talk through.
All right.
So we have cameras over the conveyor belt,
Right.
that are classifying what everything is.
Cool.
And if it's too messed up to classify, it's probably not worth anything. So that actually kind of solves itself.
Right.
So classifying whatever it is, and then going into the database to figure out what value for a like poor condition version of that obstacle might be, and making dynamic decisions as to what we should pick out or not.
Okay.
So like this is a Superman Action Comics #1. If it's only the cover and the cover has like nasty stains on it, it might actually still be worth $20. I don't know. I'm not a comic book collector, but like that itself might be rare
You're not
enough.
a comic book collector?
Nope, I'm not.
Surprising.
I like big comic books, but I don't have
Right.
like the small ones. So how would we think about building a model that could operate that quickly across that many things? Because like the most unengineered version of it is it sees everything. It searches the internet for what everything is.
Yeah.
And finds
Way
the
too
most
slow.
recent sales price. Like
Way
how long
too
would
slow.
something like that take for like some object like this wrapper for a protein bar I just had? Figuring out what this is, like what if we really dialed it in for this general model to detect.
So I think there's two approaches here,
Yeah.
and I don't know which one would be faster.
Okay.
One approach is you try to do a full end-to-end, which gets you the benefit of
End-to-end neural network.
yeah.
Whereas
but-
like that looks like something that might be worth $7.
exactly, and like you have no idea how it makes that decision.
Yeah.
And you have no real classification. It's just you fed it a bunch of training data about
Yeah.
what's worth stuff, what's not worth stuff.
And you can
then
feed it
switch
training data and make synthetic training data about things that look like that crappy.
Yeah.
And then use that for your end
Yeah,
model.
and the classic way to do synthetic training data is you do go scrape a bunch of internet posts
Yep.
on like comic book pages.
Yep.
And then for every image that you have, you distort it a bunch of ways. You
Yep.
mirror it, you turn it, you skew it, you change the color contrast, you add random missing pixels.
Yep.
And you say this is all still worth the same thing, worth the same thing, worth the same thing.
Yep.
And you could beef up that, and then you'd have this kind of like still incomprehensible end-to-end model, but being fed data, it would fairly rapidly spit out a value in some amount of guaranteed time.
Yep.
Especially if you put $20,000 of GPUs online.
Yeah.
You could get that result. The problem with that is you will never be able to predict your failure modes.
Yeah.
And so you'll never be able to really answer what is your actual efficiency versus your theoretical efficiency.
Yeah.
Without like really labor intensive reviewing hours of footage.
Yep.
So the other option, and I'm not sure if this would be slower or faster, probably slower, is actually do a multi-stage classification.
Where you do
of
the
like-
end-to-end to first segregate out what might be valuable. Then you do something more reasonable.
or you run them in parallel, where you basically do like first you classify it. Is it a magazine? Is it a soda can? Is it whatever? Mm-hmm. And then, okay, if it's a magazine, then I look up my lookup table of valuable magazines or whatever.
Yep.
Right? And the lookup table operation is almost instantaneous.
Yep.
Right? Like that's a standard database.
Yep.
You do that in thousandth of a millisecond kind of thing.
The problem is it'd have to get really, really big really, really quickly.
Yeah.
Like-
but that's obtainable. Again, you could scrape the internet for that and it could work reasonably well.
Yeah.
The trick would be sorting stuff to be like, this soda can, I don't care. For like the vast majority of stuff, these are used tissue papers, I don't care. Like they don't even hit that layer.
Yep.
And then the really expensive layer computationally would be, okay, this is probably a magazine. Now let's look up if it's worth anything. Or it's probably a cell phone.
It's probably an action figure.
Yeah,
probably,
exactly.
Probably a laptop.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah, laptops and that kind of stuff would be worth something.
But those would also be the easiest to identify. You don't need an end-to-end model for.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think the classification, like pre-sort and then value, would be more maintainable and more explainable,
Yep.
but would probably, my guess, be slower than a pure end-to-end model.
I wonder if there's anything these companies already use to find like things like obviously valuable things like jewelry, like actual gold.
I bet not. I bet it's not filtered because I think from seeing videos of this when they're doing the processing,
so fast.
what they're really trying to do, A, it's fast, B, it's very dense. Like it's not a conveyor belt with nicely laid out parts for a factory.
Yeah.
It's just like a pile of things flying by instantly, right? So really what they're just trying to do is just do a like 5% better job of sorting out recyclable from non-recyclable.
Yeah.
Like they're just trying to get a marginal gain of like slightly less stuff sent to the landfill.
Cool. I think we've been told to wrap it up for about 2 minutes now. So I'm going to say we call this just diamond in the rough.
Yeah.
3,000.
Or something to do with dumpster
As a brief aside, that is not related to robotics, and so our producers are going to be annoyed. So I keep on getting targeted for this clock that shows literary quotes relevant to the time.
Okay.
I've been targeted for this thing on like Facebook Marketplace for years at this point. Right? And I'm always like interested in it, whatever. So I tried to like do a
they know your educational background on
Yeah.
taking literature courses.
Yeah. Shut up. I looked up like, is there a DIY project? The whole frickin' thing is someone privatizing a DIY project.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's so many of those.
Like the whole company
Yeah.
is a $300 version of what someone like I think originally in like 4 or 5 years ago made on Reddit out of an old used Kindle with instructions for how to whatever. The quotes themselves come from an open source thing that the Guardian put together.
Yeah.
It's a $300 product.
Yep.
That is a e-ink screen clock that just goes through a series of these images, none of which they had to do themselves. They just had to buy the e-ink screen, put a nice wrapper, and spend gobs of money on advertising. My hunch would be this $300 product has a bill of materials of like $30.
Yep.
Like trivial software to write. And they're probably spending $100 per sale in ads because like who cares? They're still making $150 a pop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I was very frustrated to see that this was a open source project made into a product.
here's my ethics like conundrum.
Yeah.
The trolley problem. Mm-hmm. Is that better or worse than MLM schemes?
It's definitely better. It's definitely better than an MLM. It's like you say, yeah. MLMs like rip off desperate people.
All right.
This
just rips off a person rather than multiple.
No,
people.
this rips off people who like don't have the technical skills to flash an old Kindle themselves, which is like most people.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right.
With
that to side, I felt the need to argue about that. Okay, so vertical versus horizontal. So last week we attended an unexpected by me talk because I didn't look at the schedule, where someone building a frontier tech thing, to not name them too specifically, spent the better part of an hour talking about how great it was that they did nothing with vendors. Ever.
Yeah.
And like every single engineered part of their complicated thing, they design in-house.
And it is a very complicated thing. Like it is justifiably at the limits of what humans can produce reliably. Kind of level of complicated. It is not a Kindle
in-house,
screen.
And then like he even like went on to like weird abstractions of like we even built our own accounting software.
Yeah.
Which really irked me. Really.
Why?
Because like accounting software seems easy compared to robots or rockets or bioscience or whatever, but like it's legitimately hard. It's its own hard thing. And like I feel like when you work in these hard spaces like robotics, you look at like the losers who build Uber and you're like, oh, once we finish our robo-taxi,
we'll just
spin a little lookup table in an app.
Yeah, we'll just spin up an Uber competitor. It'll be fine. Yeah.
And it's stupid. It's like really stupid. It's like you're smart because you built a thing that no one can build. Now you're going to fail because you tried desperately to build a thing that like half the world can build, but you can't put enough time into building it the right way, so you fail.
Yeah.
Let's talk about vertical versus horizontal, when it makes sense, what things should be vertical, what things should be horizontal.
I think our perspective on this is obviously from the robotics type, industrial type industry, where it has different pressures than something like, I don't know,
building an
fashion.
e-ink clock.
Well, I was going to say something totally like fashion, right? Like if fashion, it might make sense to have maybe, I don't know. But I'm saying like there's cases where your margins are slim enough and your product is undifferentiated enough that like it might be a legitimate advantage.
You nerd! It says something about you that you think fashion is where your product is undifferentiated.
I look at T-shirt A, T-shirt B.
Yeah,
they're both T-shirts.
I only wear T-shirts from Coach and Balenciaga.
Yeah,
never.
That's right.
I exclusively. No, but I only wear those brands because I am a fashionista.
Yeah, but
fashionista.
My point being like these are specific to the comments specific to the robotics industry.
Yeah.
I just don't want this to be taken as a broad like vertical never makes sense because that's obviously not true.
Well, I mean like the true undifferentiated product is like a grain. like
Yeah.
corn. Corn of a certain grade
Sure.
is incredibly undifferentiated.
Yeah.
And the more parts of your stack that you can own, the more
profit you can keep for yourself.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah. Whereas robotics is not. Robotics is fairly complicated. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Okay, so when we're talking, let's define horizontal versus vertical.
Yeah. So like Polymath, for example, is a horizontal company. We're building a autonomy stack that we think applies to many different industries, many different markets. Starsky Robotics, my first startup, was a vertical company. We were retrofitting trucks with a mechatronic device that we designed ourselves. We were building all our own teleop autonomy and safety software, our own fleet management, and we're in fact acting as our own trucking company. The thought being, by controlling all of those things, we could have a chance in hell of making the thing kind of sort of work. The problem being that the worst part of that stack became the worst part of the whole company. And when you have a 35% engineering team doing the work of like 40 companies, a lot of parts of your stack are pretty bad. In fact, pretty straightforward. A lot of parts of your stack are just not as world class as you might want. Like even if you're building on the shoulders of giants, they're pretty hard.
Yeah, and what'd that do for your stress levels running that kind of company?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'd have meetings where I had an engineer saying it was incredibly disrespectful that we didn't have an espresso machine, and then I'd have
We've corrected that, by the way. If you are interested in coming to work.
Polymath has an espresso machine.
Yeah, exactly. More hand gestures.
Yeah, and then I'd have a meeting where a truck driver who had been paid every other week, but now is getting paid daily, had waited 3 days to get a paycheck because he hadn't filled his paperwork in, and was threatening to drive his truck through the building and shoot us all. And I'd have those meetings back to back with equal levels of severity. Then I'd have to immediately jump off and go talk to some insurance bigwig about how they should think about modeling out insurance for a self-driving trucking company who's doing it all themselves.
Nice.
Which, I was thin before I started that company. I mean, not like rail thin, but thin for me.
So sanity keeping.
Yeah, sanity keeping pretty rough.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when it comes down to it, there's a lot of markets where robotics, where RAS is the right model. But being a RAS operator of an industrial vehicle while being a research lab is really hard.
Yeah.
Let alone when you start chunking in other weird SaaS stuff.
Yeah, and I think from the technical side, robots are a mixture of hardware, software, and a lot actually user considerations.
Yeah.
Like unless your robots are entirely internally used, at which point
which is the reason, which is like a reason to be a RAS company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's you got to consider those three things, and those three things are fundamentally very different efforts.
Yeah.
So it's difficult technically to keep all three efforts running with similar levels of effort.
Yeah.
The thing we've talked about before is that Polymath might legitimately have one of the bigger autonomy-focused teams in industry.
Yeah.
Right? Because all we do is just autonomy software. Whereas a company that's doing a vertical play on just mining autonomy, for example, might be 5 times our size, but have half as many autonomy engineers because the entire rest of them are working on hardware and networking and user interface. And
or flying to the field.
Exactly.
Or
service,
or weird product
support.
marketing on weird niches of stuff. Or product studies on whatever. I mean, an interesting thing happened, been thinking about this a lot recently at Starsky, where when I was talking to investors, they always cared about, how do you make it more and more and more autonomous?
Yeah.
And part of why we were a trucking company is oh, we don't know how to drive in the snow? Cool. We don't serve markets where it ever snows. Maybe in a couple of years, we'll serve markets where it snows sometimes, just not right now.
Yeah.
And I don't ever have to have a conversation about mapping out how snow works, let alone bad connectivity or bad lane markings or what have you. We got to a point where, we were autonomous 99.5% of all miles. There might be a remote supervisor, but we didn't really need them for safety critical decisions. And the difference between solving that last 0.5% of autonomy, which might be going from a level 3 system to a level 4 system or level 5 system, depending on how your definitions work, say that costs $5 billion.
Yeah.
And that $5 billion might save us $500 to $1,000 per truck per year in labor cost.
Yeah.
On the other hand,
So it like strictly does not make sense.
I mean, like if every truck in the world is a Starsky truck, yeah, it might
Like
make
that,
sense.
that barely makes sense.
It might pencil.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if we had invested if we had a data scientist work for a summer, a data science intern work for a summer to improve our pricing algorithm for how we bid for jobs and what prices we're willing to accept, that could probably drive us an extra $1,000 per truck per month of top line at no additional expense.
Yeah.
And like you get these weird trade-offs that happen inside of a vertical company, where like clearly the right decision there is the latter thing, but that's entirely out of whack with investor expectations.
Yeah.
Like that is the wrong decision if you're an investor thinking like, what's the best magic autonomy team for how this all works? I think like you also then get judged like as a vertical company who had to develop our own full stack stuff. We got judged on like how our economics looked compared to like a publicly traded trucking companies. Where like I had a Series B investor be like, I don't know, your trucking operation is slightly losing money. The publicly traded companies make a 10% margin. How do you explain that? Like I can't do complicated amortization schedules of my trucks that I buy outright. I don't self-insure for health insurance.
Yeah, you don't have enough time.
Yeah,
to do
like
that.
we basically never had a finance team. We had a guy for the last 4 months.
Yeah.
That just wasn't a thing. And I think there's when I guess I'd love to talk through is like when does what make sense to do vertically versus what makes sense to do horizontally? Because like I think the company that we overheard building their own accounting software was taken at face value. If like they actually built real accounting software,
Sure.
not a spreadsheet that like took in data from another tab that then like did some
they did
like
a whole
actual accounting software. That's ridiculous. That is like they should absolutely not do that. They should fire everyone involved in that decision, like just like tomorrow. They're a pestilence on the company. However, like being especially in a market as hard as robotics or as new as robotics, truly outsourcing everything is not a real option.
No.
So like if you're attacking a vertical market, which things should you do internally versus which things should you do externally?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the thing we advise groups that we talk to always is that figure out what is actually mission critical to your customer and make sure that works really, really well and all the pieces around it work well. And then everything else can be either farmed out or ignored.
Yeah.
Right. And that's different market to market. But I think a lot of, if you're thinking of starting a startup, a lot of the understanding of product market fit is figuring out like actually who is our customer. And coming back to Polymath, we took some time to figure out who's our ideal customer, what do they look like?
Yeah.
And we had the benefit of being broad but kind of narrow in our autonomy approach where we could flex a little bit and not have to pivot the entire company every time we changed customer bases. And that's certainly an advantage where being that kind of wide-focused company allows us to make those changes without completely throwing out all the work that we've been doing. But that works because we're in a layer in the autonomy where that's common across industries. If we were doing something specific, coming back to your question of like strawberry picking, to pull a random robotics example, that is a real thing that people want to pay real money for, or fruit picking in general.
Yeah.
And there is no contractor out there that you could, or consulting firm or whatever, that you could pay to develop a better fruit picking thing than you could if you focused on that one problem.
So
like just the fruit picking.
I disagree with you.
Okay.
So I think a lot of teams approach these sorts of things from like we're really smart, we can build the best thing. I disagree. We're not really smart. We can't build the best thing. Like whoever you are, there's someone smarter.
Sure.
Like there's someone who can build a better thing than you. Maybe their conditions are slightly different. Maybe they had 6 months to build it and you had 4. Maybe they just have more IQ points. There's someone always better. There's always going to be someone better. I think the decision criteria is like you should build the bare minimum. You should start off with an assumption that you're buying.
No, sure.
And because like I think
sure. No, I think we align on that.
Yeah.
But I think the critical thing is like there's specific function to let's use fruit breaking.
Yeah. Let's say strawberry. So my point.
Yeah.
A way that what you said could be interpreted is our customer cares about strawberries being picked. We need to do strawberry picking. What I would say is like, I don't know, like we're technical. We understand this product market, this market, or we've paid attention to it, or we care about it. Honestly, is half the battle. We're going to look through the whole world of things that might be useful for picking strawberries, and any single thing we can buy that just shows up and that like we think can reasonably work, we should default buy it. I'm confident we could in fact buy some model that is really good at detecting the actual strawberry thing versus the stem thing. I'm sure we could. I know we could buy an arm. I know we could buy a series of arms. But like, could we buy a orchestration layer to manage 6 different arms that are all picking strawberries at the same time so they don't bump into each other? Because like if we start off with like let's focus on whatever the customer cares about. They care about strawberries being picked. But like if it turns out we could buy everything, but no one in the world has ever built a arm fleet manager for managing 8 arms that are picking over each other and doing whatever, that actually is suddenly the most important thing. And like the arm, the grasper, the visual model, all that is suddenly like doesn't really matter if 4 people have built it, especially if one of them is willing to sell it to you.
Yeah, I agree. I think,
and like the integration of that and the weird loser things like that are actually the magic. Like I mean, like a thing that we've experienced, a stupid thing that we have built, 2 different things that we've built and we want to open source or outsource. That turns out like we haven't found a version that we like, or one of them to focus on is a remote start for our vehicles, right?
Yeah.
Like we do not want to build a piece of hardware to turn an engine on when it listens to a message over IP, and we have not been able to find that anywhere in the world. That is a good startup idea. Now, like we religiously want to be a software company and not a hardware company, but like my point is like if we had bought everything in our stack that we possibly could have along the way, it could be that we ended up finding that to be our special magic wedge. And like in reality, with the stuff that we do, with the number of robots that we support, we found like 1 billion of those weird wedges. While trying to buy everything we possibly can.
Yeah. No. So sorry. So I agree that you should be trying to buy things. I think my point is that in robotics is young enough and complicated enough and specialized enough that it's unlikely you'll find a world-class strawberry picker today.
Yeah.
You'll find a lot of research papers.
Yeah.
You'll find a lot of people who've tried it. But all of it has been unsuccessful. And usually due to reasons of productivity or robustness. Right? And like and my point is like you should buy an ML model for detecting strawberries. And you should definitely, if it's a robot, you should definitely buy your navigation from Polymath instead of trying to build it yourself.
Like a loser.
Right, exactly.
No one likes people who build navigation themselves. You heard it here first. A lot of people have been saying it.
That's right. But realistically, like I don't think there's a good, robust picker of strawberries off the shelf that you can buy. You can read a bunch of university papers, you can read stuff, but like I don't think what you're talking about exists.
It might not.
Right? And I think that's the point is like so I think we're agreeing. We're just coming at it from different directions. Like my point being like think about
I would actually almost argue that that's a reason to stay away from that entire market.
Just because people have tried it and it hasn't worked?
No, that like that itself is so hard. Like building a grasper, a vision to grasping pipeline that is both like reliable and robust and doesn't damage the fruit. And can operate outdoors. That itself is so hard.
It doesn't cost $500,000.
And you're replacing a person who gets paid less than $1 per pick.
Exactly.
That itself kind of creates a scenario where it's hard to imagine success. When like really you should be thinking like, okay, what's a market where like if I do one thing really well, I can be successful because that's how SaaSland works.
I think we're doing like general startup advice here, but I think the other thing that we keep talking about is like try to minimize the amount of miracles in your startup. And I think robots inherently have a lot of miracles in them already.
And the problem is like you build the thing and then you realize 9 months later there's like 4 more miracles. Like a thing that like I
mean the robot turning on reliably early on is miraculous to a large extent.
Yeah, but I mean, like we're at a weird point where like being able to reliably deploy software to a fleet that we don't visit is itself a hard, weird thing that like we couldn't buy 2 years ago and we needed.
Yeah.
We need that was an existential thing for us as a company.
Yeah.
Like, can we deploy across a bunch of fleets without needing to ship engineers to God knows where?
Or ship hardware to us and ship it back and all sorts of stuff. Yeah. Yeah. That's another, if you want to talk about startup stuff.
Yeah.
Reliable remote deployment
Yeah.
in a place where you can't control the network, can't control the hardware, and you have unreliable power networking because it's a robot. That's a legitimately hard problem.
I mean, we just had a call with a client today about pitching them how they're mostly static robot. Maybe they should just run an Ethernet cable too, because they keep on getting interference. Yeah.
Like you go to one of these farms and they have 900 megahertz sprinklers, and suddenly your entire RF spectrum is full of garbage. And good luck getting radio out of it.
So, in terms of what should be done vertically versus what shouldn't be, so I think we're both of the viewpoint that if you can buy, you should, kind of across the board.
Yeah.
How do you? So let's say you didn't, or you couldn't buy at the time, and you built an in-house thing.
Okay.
How do you decide to kill it?
How do you decide to kill it?
Yeah. Right? Because here's the problem. So at Starsky, in 2019, we were bashing our heads against the wall to try to get the vehicle to drive with no person in it. And we were, realistically, we were locked. Yeah. We had made decisions about sensors in 2017 that were unchangeable.
Yeah.
Because because we were so vertical, we had built, sometimes sensor drivers, perception stacks, all of our own testing software, all of that around very specific sensors. And we had to make those decisions in 2017, which meant that sensors that were not robustly available to us in 2017 were not a real option in 2019.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's say you're in that situation. Let's say you've built a teleop platform yourself. Let's say you built whatever yourself. How do you decide to kill it when there's something better that's commercially available?
I mean, I would take the engineering approach. One of the things I do quite commonly is test out stuff. Test out alternative solutions.
Yep.
That's why you and I get into sparring matches about my sensor budget, about purchasing new sensors.
Ilia buys a sensor every month and then is annoyed with me when I don't let him buy a really expensive sensor when he just bought a toy. We already have a LiDAR at home, Ilia.
I know, but it's not this one. But you got to
This LiDAR is like no other LiDAR in the world,
That's right.
Stefan.
That's
and
right.
if we don't start testing on it now, there's no way we could use it in 9 months.
Yeah, I mean, that
one got a little close to home. That was a little bit of a mean jab there.
No, it's fine. I'm happy because I kept poking this manufacturer about getting us data on performance in dust and rain, and they're like, "Yeah, we perform great in dust and rain." And I'm like, "Okay, show me." And they finally showed me, and I'm like, "No, you don't perform well."
Wait, is that the one who I didn't like to buy?
No.
Or a different one?
Different one.
The different one you wanted to buy more recently that was cheaper?
No, that one's fine.
Okay.
It's third one. Anyway, point being, keep testing stuff. Even if it's expensive, it's way cheaper to buy a $5,000 sensor and test it for a few days than to keep a team of 3 people building stuff that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right? That is, keep in your accounting mind, if you're writing your own accounting software. Anyway, we're trying to keep
Dear listener, I just made a joke about the company we're making fun of, and Ilia had to edit it out. I'm censored. Please. I'm repressed.
Yeah, you're about as censored as our current political groups. Anyway, so keep testing stuff, and even if it feels expensive, R&D is always expensive.
Yeah.
But the point is that first version that sort of somewhat works and sort of points the direction in a different way, you have to keep doing a little bit of investment in it, because the catch-up investment you have to do in human capital is much worse.
Yeah.
It's 2 orders of magnitude worse.
Yeah.
Right? Your $5,000 sensor turns into $500,000 of 6 months of human time.
Yeah.
Easily.
I mean, I think switching from Freightliner trucks to Volvos at Starsky was a 6-month effort.
Of how many people?
5, 10.
Yeah.
It was a real.
Yeah.
And we had to do that because we kind of got with the controls resources that we had, we got about as good as we could get on speed controllers on their janky automatic transmission, and had to just jump to Volvo.
Yeah. And that's a painful decision, and you have to, having worked at Amazon, I haven't fully drunk the Kool-Aid, but I do like their two-way door thing, where when you're evaluating a decision, figure out, is it a two-way door where you can go through and go back easily, or is it you go through and you can't get back because it's too friggin' expensive or it's too time consuming? and completely changing your fundamental architecture over 6 months is definitely not a two-way door.
Yeah.
It is not something you do lightly.
Which also makes it easier and easier and easier to not do and to put off.
To not do.
And to hear reasons why you shouldn't do.
Exactly. So I think the way to fight that is to always be like, okay, but what is it currently costing us in human capital, in time, in market opportunity, in lost customer contracts of not being able to do this?
I think another thing that like is hard for companies who want to be like super duper vertical is the things that customers care about are often disconnected from the things that suck up engineering resources.
Oh yeah, we talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
Like that fruit picking example, the large agricultural conglomerate that picks fruit just cares about undamaged fruit per cost of picking.
And the fact
that's it.
and the fact that you guys have had to swap out localization vendors 14 times
is irrelevant.
Irrelevant.
Right? And like
that, frankly speaking, they might choose you over a competitor's fruit picking thing if your dashboard, your live dashboard for baskets of strawberries picked in the last hour looks nicer than your competitors.
Yeah.
And if your competitor has better robotics, they might lose if you're better at a weird front end thing.
And again, how to be better at a weird front end thing is don't try to build it yourself in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Like unless you absolutely have to.
Or don't have all of your engineering resources rebuilding stuff that's purchasable.
Yeah.
Like if there aren't any clever front ends for strawberry farms, that actually might be the better use of engineering resources than like being the 48th robot arm in an outdoor farm.
Exactly. So focus again. I think we agree. We come at it from different directions, right? But it's like focus on the really critical thing. Buy whatever you can, but whatever you can't, that's what you're building. And if your answer is I can't buy anything, I have to build all of it, you're probably a vertical company, and you're probably not in a market that's easily.
You probably have a pretty hard uphill challenge.
Very, very hard. Right. Like if you're in a market where literally nothing exists, you're more of an R&D company than you are an actual product company.
Yeah.
Real products don't build everything themselves.
All right, so I think we've hit it. What are we going to talk about next week?
I don't know. Will there be time for a podcast next week?
I don't know.
We'll find out.
I'll look at my laptop for the 48th time this meeting.
We did have.
Next week's not even that scary for me.
All right, we did have a friend of the show who had to move their visit to next week.
Yep.
Matt from Bucket Robotics, so he'll show up next week, maybe the week after. We'll see.
Sometime.
So we may have a new visitor, which will be fun.
Yeah, we're starting to do these guest things pretty frequently, and we'd love feedback on how it's going. Yeah. We are trying actively to be good hosts and ask good questions, and it's a growth process.
Send us show suggestions. How much lighting do you want on Stefan's side versus my side? First time we tried it, Stefan was in the dark. Is it an improvement that he's not in the dark anymore? Is it less scary? Is it more scary? Should we have a musical number? Yeah.
So Cassie actually I don't know how much of our podcast she listens to. I don't think much, but she overheard me say on one of them that like my wife thinks I look the best with a mask on in the dark, and she's like, "I don't say that to you." And then she turned the light off.
Specification.
Yeah.
Don't say and to you. that's a double like questionable thing.
Just to everyone else.
Yeah, it's all right. It's just like him claiming
podcasts are all about like things being familiar and frequent. Yeah, repetition.
Hang out with the crowd once every X number of weeks.
Yeah.
Single digit X number of weeks.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this week.
See you next time.